All right, hello there. Let's jump into Yale. First question, short answers. Students have time to explore their academic interests before committing to one or more major fields of study. Many students either modify their original academic direction or change their minds entirely. As of this moment, what academic areas seem to fit your interests or goals most comfortably? Please indicate up to 3 from the list provided. It's not really an essay. I had to double check that. I went onto my Common App, and this is what it looks like. It's a drop-down menu of your first choice, second choice, and third choice major. And the essay that starts it all is actually this one below. So let's go to the next one here. Tell us about a topic or idea that excites you and is related to one or more academic areas you selected above. Why are you drawn to it? 200 words or fewer. First thing I noticed is 200 words. Most schools will typically connect this to maybe like a 300-word essay, 250-word essay. Granted, there's some that's like 100 word or 150, but 200 is, to me, relatively on the shorter side. So you have to get to your point quickly. I've seen students be able to write very elaborate hooks and then still manage to pull it off. But more often than not, I've seen students try writing a narrative, a hook, and a story, and then they leave barely any room in the remaining 200 words to write more of the high IQ signals that I'm looking for to showcase that your interest is not just basic window shopping. And that's really the phrase I want to try to proliferate more out there for parents and students. Like when I do an initial meeting, because I do them every time to time, prospective clients and whatnot, they would ask me questions about like summer programs and what they recommend. The question I would ask them in return to kind of gauge where they're at is, what do you want to major in and why? It's particular to 10th graders and 11th graders. I think 10th grade is fair to ask simply because you have summer programs that start opening up in December. And if you're applying for a high tier school like Stanford asks you for the last two. What have you done the last 2 summers? So 10th to 11th, 11th to 12th. Putting that aside, I think for this, it's, are you a window shopper or have you dove deep into the subject and found high IQ interests in areas? I like business because business is fun and interesting, and I want to get into marketing. It's super prevalent and common versus, I see that deglobalization, decoupling today is leading to new economic dynamics that makes me interested in learning more about blah, 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 blah. There's a bit more sophistication there, a higher IQ level. So are you window shopping or are you a deep diver? I use the swimming pool analogy here too. Are you in the shallow end of the swimming pool or have you gone to the deep end of the swimming pool? This is your chance to showcase that for your major interest. Another question I often get is, do I need to write also about my other major interests? And the answer is generally no. You can focus on your primary major that you chose, the first one. What I think is like the best of both worlds, like to reach that high coaches pro tip approval for me here is you make it about your main major, but your interests naturally interdisciplinarily tie to your other majors. So for example, let's say you're interested in business, as I just mentioned, or economics, and economics naturally is connected to things like geopolitics, and maybe your major choice is also East Asian studies. So you can mention how, in particular in economics, your interest in China trade relations connect you to these deeper kind of questions and more concentrated regional focuses. Hope that made sense. Let's move on to the next one. What is it about Yale that has led you to apply? Right away, 125 words. 125 words is really, really, really short. Most schools will offer minimum 300, 250. Maybe they'll go upwards of 650. I'm thinking of schools like Cornell. University of Michigan has like 550 words. So 125 means right away you need to be economical with your word choice. You have to be efficient. One of the ways you're efficient is with syntax structure. So for example, you can do what I do is like couplets. What I call them as is couplets, like from A to B, from to C to D. I see that at Yale, there's a range of things that allow me to pursue not only X, but also Y, right? So you're kind of jam packing. It's like you're going to Costco and you're bundling it all together. So the syntax is really important. Granted, I've seen some students who completely go the opposite way, and it sounds insane, but they create a hook. They do this, like, they spend 50 words expressing this like hook and motif about what they want to study at Yale. And usually the theme about Yale is about being very interdisciplinary. It's about showing that, your interest in in studying one particular subject in a grander scheme of things requires of you so much more many lenses, so much more many frames of thought to be truly able to develop an expertise in the area. So this is another one of those interdisciplinary type of things I'm looking for. In what way do you see yourself matching and utilizing all of what Yale has to offer, which in a nutshell is their concept of and. You are not just an engineer, you're an engineer and a musician. You're a biologist and a philosopher. So normally I see some students will therefore just give me like two variables, like their major choice and then and photographer. I don't think necessarily that's enough. I think that I would personally try to look for interdisciplinary triplets at least. You don't want to overdo it because again, it's 125 words. So if you could show me that you have an interest in one core area, but how that tangentially makes you curious about two other areas, which then leads you to really aligning with the philosophy of what Yale offers. By the way, if you're wondering like, how do you understand or how do you learn the philosophy of Yale or any college for that matter? What you want to do is you want to go onto their website. So you go to yale.edu and you normally can go to their mission statement. You could go to their About Us. You can go to their undergraduate class and you start looking for those types of metas. Every school has a lot of similarities. Let's be honest about it. Like, they all want to be into research or innovative or diversity or progressive, but for the most part, the goal is to try to find the little kind of differences from each of the schools. And Yale, I think, for the last at least 2 years for me, has been about it's been about the interdisciplinary approach. Okay, next one. So what inspires you? So after you write those two short answers, short essays, you then have these short responses or short answer questions. 200 characters. 200 characters, what's the limiting factor? Is it 200 characters or is it 35 words? That's interesting to me. Actually check that. I think it's character limited. Oh, wow. This goes on forever. No way. Sorry, guys. I'm curious now what the, oh, nope. Cuts off. So that should be closer to, let's see. I think that's 200. Okay, so the limiting factor will be 200 characters. All right, so what inspires you? What is my algorithm for this? Naturally, if you have socioeconomic circumstances, I can see a strong argument for writing about family. Though, again, a lot of parents or a lot of students, will be writing about family. They'll be writing about friends. One of my favorite ways of inspiration is to go for an IQ signal. IQ signals could be perhaps, for example, mine would be A Pale Blue Dot by Carl Sagan. To me, it's like when you turn what helps you understand the world and fills you with curiosity, but then turns it into poetry, turns it into something that gives you almost a spiritual kind of experience, and being able to find the synergy or the kind of the connective bridge between both while listening to and reading the words of Sagan, A Pale Blue Dot, like that's super inspirational to me. So sometimes you go with something like that. It almost even links to an EQ. I've seen some EQs work really well too. In the previous Stanford one, I talked about how a student wrote about a historical moment they wished to witness was his grandfather making it onto a U.S. boat as a refugee during the outbreak of the Korean War. That could be an inspiration too. It's the bravery he had doing it, knowing he was afraid, but doing it anyways, right? That bravery. So what inspires you to me has a lot of potential nuance and sophistication to it. I don't want to overdo it because overdoing it can seem a little plasticky. So it has to be genuine. It has to be something that ideally is unique to you and your personal life and your personal interest. The next one, If you could teach any college course, write a book, or create an original piece of art of any kind, what would it be? My first thought is to make this major related. But then it's about, strategy as in just as a holistic, what else, where else would major choice fit? Because we already kind of mentioned the major in the why are you drawn to your major in the 200 words. We also might have mentioned it a bit more in the 124 5 words of why Yale. So does this have to be major related in that regard? I don't think so. This might be the time where I'd say if you wanted to make it major related, be careful that you already have potentially other essays where you're going to expunge that type of vibe, or ingredient about yourself. Here, you can try going for something more creative. You could try going for something that shows a bit more flair. Create an original piece of art of any kind. What would it be? What's my advice here? One thing I would ask you never to do, and this also later on would, I get it from like USC responses I get all the time. It's please don't write a college course you want to teach is like personal finance. It's actually a very, very common type. When you're writing a book, I could see students writing about cookbooks and baking books. Guys, I'm not a fan of cooking and baking. As an answer for essays, I love cooking and baking in life, but like as a response in letter to roommates, I see cooking and baking so often. I'd probably argue it's 20-30% of the time I see someone writing about baking or cooking. So if you wrote a book, I'm not saying because it's prevalent and common that it's not a good idea. I'm just bearish on the idea that it will be unique. It's very tough to impress me with a cooking or baking response. So if you said you'd write a cookbook or a baking book, my expectation, I can even kind of play that out in my mind. Like you're probably going to write about like fusion cooking that matches with your culture or your ex/American heritage. And I'd probably roll my eyes. I'm not that interested in it. What would I suggest instead? I think that you can try to give a high IQ or EQ commentary about a certain type of social issue that you see today. That doesn't necessarily have to be major related. Maybe you are a robotics engineer, but you also do Model United Nation, and you became very, very invested in a particular type of a social issue. That could be an opportunity for you to expand upon something like that in this response. So I'm looking for a non-major related high IQ or high EQ, because I think we already kind of have the major choice kind of laid out at the top here. Granted, I don't mind if you did a major related one. Maybe the major related one here could be much more specialized, right? So, yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else useful here. I'm okay with the major one here, but it has to be distinctive enough or highly specialized so it doesn't necessarily overlap with the essays above. Okay, let's move on. Other than a family member, who is someone who has had a significant influence on you? What has been the impact of their influence? Dang it, man. This is kind of similar to what inspires you. I would have used Carl Sagan here then, I guess, because it's preventing you from using a family member. So if I use Carl Sagan here, right, how he kind of taught me the poetry and science, then what inspires you could be potentially something else. Like if I had to give you an honest answer, I used to work for a law firm where there was a guy who, really young for his age, married and had like a 1-year-old kid. But he woke up at 4 a.m. every day and he worked his butt off. Like I was still young back then, staying late up at night, waking up late. But this guy, he showed me work ethic because he had a wife and a kid that he had to take care of. So on top of that, of working like extended hours for our boss, the lawyer, he also took night school for law school. And now that I look back, I'm like, it's incredibly humbling to see the dedication and the focus that some people have for their families so that they could do well. That inspired me. So it could be things like that. Maybe that could be my significant influence here. Donald was his name. Shout out to Donald, who probably will never come across this. Hopefully he's doing well in life and his kid as well. But when it comes to significant influence, I'm hoping you don't use mainstream pop people. I don't know why I'm opposed to it, other than I'm opposed to it. So if you gave me Kim Kardashian or Taylor Swift, I don't think those are particularly intellectual decisions, EQ or IQ decisions. That isn't to say like, oh man, I might get some hate for this. There's definitely an argument for why Taylor Swift is a role model, guys. Okay. But I guess the argument there is you don't want to go too mainstream, too pop. You want to be looking into more people who might be under the cover. Because as a reader, I would like to learn as well. So when I'm reading an admissions page, I'd like to stumble upon a response that intrigues me. So that's kind of the thought there. The reason why, what the impact on their life and on you has been is important. So it's two checkpoints for me. Is the person you chose interesting enough? And is the influence and the impact meaningful enough? What is something about you that is not included elsewhere in your application? So this is an open-ended essay. I would try to use the letter to your roommate brainstorm. In the previous Stanford guide, I tell my students, try to think of 5 to 10 facts about you that are not essay related or major related. And one of the examples I use is like, I have a pug named Burrito that I crochet sweaters for. Right. So like that would be kind of a prime place to put something like that here, because it shows a bit of spunk, a bit of flavor. It's kind of cute. It's kind of fun. Things like that would be really nice. You can also go the EQ way with the fact that maybe you have a younger brother, and because your mom works a lot, that you're in charge of like making the PB&J sandwiches every morning for him, and you have a lot of fun like cutting out like animal characters into them for him. I could see that being very wholesome and very sweet as well. There's a lot of range in this. It's hard for me to give you an algorithm of how to approach this. Can I narrow it down any more for you? What is something about you that is not included elsewhere in your application? I mean, the key point here is not included anywhere else in your application, guys. So if you reiterate, I could see a parent coming in and say, flex one of your strongest achievements again, flex your publication again. I think you're not understanding what they're looking for in this prompt. They're looking for something that's just super personal and just out there, idiosyncratic almost. Okay, so essays. So applicants submitting the coalition application or Common App will respond to one of the following prompts, and it's a 400-worder. So this is a meaty one. This is pretty decent. So you have to choose between the three here, and you just need to write one. The first one is reflect on a time you discussed an important issue important to you with someone holding an opposing view. Why did you find the experience meaningful? This is recyclable to, for example, if you use the example I gave for the Stanford guide. Say you had a father who grew up with the K-Town riots and had held racist views against African Americans. Then you, as a daughter or a son to that, who has an African American best friend, this could be one of those that fits the bill here. It's an important issue to you, and it's about someone talking to someone who has an opposing view. Now, that doesn't mean, like, what I see a lot of students will do here is they'll make this a Disney story. I'm not a fan of Disney, okay? In terms of like storytelling, because it's so predictable and it doesn't show the rawness and the grit of reality. Why did you find the experience meaningful? Maybe you weren't able to convince them, right? You don't have to turn the story into, and then I convinced my dad and now he's a devout blah, 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 blah. Like, sometimes you can't change people's minds on it, but you could still learn from trying. And so what did you learn? I think there's a lot more sophistication potential in this essay. I really like this. This is a gut check type of essay. And what I mean by that is, like, if you do this well, like, there's a high ceiling of value that you can invest and offer into your applications to the readers. Number two, reflect on your membership in a community to which you feel connected. Why is this community meaningful to you? You may define community however you like. So there's a little kind of qualifier here. I think, just to be clear, like, a community doesn't have to be in school. It doesn't have to be a club. It could be an online community. For example, mine would be like Mac Rumors and being a part of the moderators or the DIY, posters that post guides, and they don't get any money for it. We just do it because we're enthusiasts and we love it. I could see a lot of students recycling a prompt number 7, even a prompt number 1 leadership essay from your UCs. So if you're rushed for time and you're trying to find portability, recyclability, there's your way there. But generally speaking, I think that this is solid, but if you had the best version of prompt 1 and the best version of prompt 2, I might be thinking that there's a higher ceiling for prompt 1, but it's harder to achieve. Let's go to prompt 3 real quick. 3, reflect on an element of your personal experience that you feel will enrich your college. How has it shaped you? If you think about it, the whole father, racism thing, that could fit in here as well. That's a personal experience. And it's something you can bring to the college, and insight and understanding, and kind of from your failures of perhaps not being able to change your father's mind about it, at least the things you learned through that process, how it shaped you into being more of an advocate, more of someone who understands kind of what it takes to start to unroot deeply ingrained, biases, etc. So I could see this being pretty much the same as number 1, but it's more open. So I would argue that between number 1 and number 3, I would go with number 3 because it's like it loosens the belt a bit based on the prompt. It gives you a bit more range to talk about things. Whereas number 1, you have to have an opposing view. Someone has to have an opposing view. So to me, I actually would not do number 1. I would go with number 3. And then I might be tempted with number 2, depending on how cool or interesting or unique your community is. So yeah, there's that. Did I miss anything else here? Any overarching thoughts from me? I think there's a potential more so than other essay sets or college supplemental sets for there to be some overlapping. The question types lend to that. So as I mentioned earlier, for example, the first essay about your why major can potentially overlap with the college course that you're writing. It could potentially also overlap with someone who's been a significant influence on you, like Carl Sagan, and maybe you're interested in physics, so you talk about Carl Sagan in your intro hook for your why major. So I guess be a bit more careful about being a strategist, dividing up all your ingredients so that you're showing range in each. Otherwise, yeah, I just realized I'm not a fan of prompt number 1 when you have prompt number 3. Interesting. Yeah, that's all I had. I'm going to be doing Cornell next. I think I have a student of mine that requested that one. I'll see you guys soon.